Coming up next, Book TV presents Afterwards, an hour-long program where we invite guest hosts to interview authors. This week, president of King's College and best-selling author Dinesh D'Souza discusses his new book, The Roots of Obama's Rage, which examines what he claims is President Obama's true ideology and what he believes is its ultimate source. The author of What's So Great About America uses biographies of Barack Obama and books about the 2008 presidential campaign to argue that the president is attempting to follow in his father's footsteps. He debates this theory with Newsweek's Jonathan Alter, author of The Promise.
Welcome, Dinesh. Let's get started by asking about the title of your book, The Roots of Obama's Rage. Most people, even critics of the president, don't see him as a person who's full of rage. He has a rather calm, even temperament, especially compared to some others who've held the office. What evidence do you have that there's any rage at all within Barack Obama?
I think the people who say that Obama is calm and serene and cerebral are right, but he's calm and cerebral about things that don't fundamentally move him in a passionate way. So, for example, some people on the liberal side have said, we notice that Obama shows no passion when he talks about poverty or the inner city or civil rights. But I think the reason for that is that those issues are not primary for him at all. Now, contrast this with the way Obama talks about, for example, Wall Street or the banks or the insurance companies or the pharmaceutical companies or the oil companies, and then you notice that his lip curls and his voice goes up a pitch and he begins to use words like kicking their butt. In other words, the anger does begin to seep out when he's talking about the guys at the top that in a way I think are the targets of his rage.
Well, we'll get into the specifics of whether that constitutes rage in a few moments, but to give viewers a little better sense of who you are, you write a lot in your book about Obama's father, Barack Obama Sr., whom he met only once in his life when he was a little boy growing up in Hawaii. Tell us, if you could, about your own father, what he read, what he wrote, if anything, and what kind of business he was in and what kind of influence he had over you.
On me? Well, I come from an intact family, very different than Obama. My father was a chemical engineer, my mom a housewife. I grew up in India and Bombay. So I have a kind of third world background, if you will, although my family is westernized. We spoke English at home. We were bilingual, Hindustani also. So my dad worked for pharmaceutical companies. We were in the middle class, without not lacking for anything. I went to Jesuit schools run by Catholic missionaries. I think my father had a huge influence on me. In fact, a profoundly shaping influence on me. And I share many of his values.
Do you believe that you should be held accountable for what your father believed, whatever his belief system might have been?
No, of course not. In other words, I don't think you can automatically impute parental opinions to the children, no.
But isn't that kind of what you're doing, honestly, in your book?
Let's look. Obama was asked by the publishing industry to write a book, an autobiography. And he wrote a book significantly titled Dreams from My Father. Not Dreams of My Father. I'm not writing about my father's dreams. Dreams from my father. So the dreams i.e. Obama, got from his dad. And if you read the book, his dad is a powerful presence in the book, even though he was an absence in Obama's life. I'm kind of reminded of the line in Homer's Iliad where Achilles, the main character, is missing for many chapters, and Homer writes, Achilles absent was Achilles still. So even off stage, Achilles is kind of driving the narrative. And I think so it is with Barack Obama Sr. Even though he's not there, Obama is obsessed with him, he's pursuing him, he's trying to find out about him, and in fact, he's trying to shape his character and his values in the image of his father.
But shouldn't he be judged on what he does and says in his own life rather than trying to impute things to him based on something that his father, who he's also in some interviews and in the book quite critical of, to judge Obama on on his father's life? Isn't there something that's a little unfair about doing that?
Well, let's remember that Obama says of his father, "It was into my father's image, the black man, son of Africa, that I had filled all the attributes that I sought in myself." In other words, and I quote from Newsweek, from the magazine you work for, Sarah Obama, Obama's granny, his grandmother, who says, I look at them and I see all the same things. The son has taken everything from the father. So, in other words, I'm not making this up. The theory that Obama is shaped in the image of his father is in Obama's own book. Now, all I'm doing is saying, yes, we should judge Obama by his actions, but it's not unreasonable to ask, does Obama's compass, his ideological framework, which he may have gotten from his father, help us to understand what he's doing and what he will do in the future?
You know, you've written a number of controversial books. In the End of Racism, after that book came out, there were a number of black conservatives who took issue with you, essentially calling the black underclass barbarians. They took issue with you calling for the repeal of the Civil Rights Act. So you've always been a rather controversial figure, and that applies going back to when you outed gays at Dartmouth College as an undergraduate there. This book is also controversial. The pushback on it is that you are asserting rather than establishing or proving that somehow Barack Obama is hostile to the idea of capitalism. So I would just ask you today, where is your evidence? Not your speculation, but your evidence, hard evidence, that our president is somehow hostile to capitalism.
Well, just to flash back for a moment, I didn't out any gays. In my college years, our newspaper ran an article about a gay students group and named the 5 officers who had applied for college funding. My book, The End of Racism, was an examination. It's a 600-page book, by the way, with 2,000 footnotes. 2 black conservatives disagreed with it. And it's, you know, I agree it's a tough subject. It was looking at why non-white immigrants to America do pretty well. African Americans and indigenous minorities, American Indians also, to some degree Hispanics, not as well. So these are legitimate subjects to look at. And because I've grown up in a different country, I feel like I see America from the outside and from the inside, and that gives me a certain perspective. So maybe that's one reason my work is controversial. Now, coming to Obama, what is the evidence that he dislikes capitalism?
Yeah.
Oh, well, the first job that Obama got, or one of his first jobs, was for a small...
No, in the presidency. I'm not talking about...
Oh, you mean in his policies?
I'm not talking about imputing certain motives or intentions to him based on things that happened dozens of years ago, which is a very slippery business. I'm talking about in the presidency. He rejected the advice that he nationalize the banks when he could have easily done that. He's cut taxes for small business on 8 separate occasions in the 20 months he's been in office. He has, given plenty of speeches extolling the idea of, the greatness of our country as a land of opportunity for people. Please, if you could, give me an example of something that he has said, beyond being critical of fat cat bonuses or whatever he might have called them, where he has actually shown an underlying hostility to capitalism. You call him menacing. That's a very strong term, that he's a menacing president. And I'd just like to know a little more of your evidence.
I think his menacing influence is more in foreign policy. But let's talk about capitalism. There was a debate in the 20th century over capitalism versus statism, a debate that capitalism was widely believed to have won. Even Bill Clinton prominently declared that the era of big government is over. Obama has reestablished the era of big government with a vengeance. He seems to treat community activism and government service as more noble than entrepreneurship. He rarely, you say in your own book, he rarely has a good word to say about entrepreneurship.
But,
let me
finish. On that point, you quote me from my book, The Promise, saying that he doesn't use the word entrepreneurship enough, which is what I said. But you use that in a context to make it seem as if in my book I'm arguing that he somehow is hostile to entrepreneurship or doesn't believe in entrepreneurship. I don't suggest that in my book, and there's no evidence that Barack Obama
I'm not saying you
believes that.
Look, I only use the quote from your book. If I cite a quote from your book, I'm not endorsing your entire book or
but
peeling
you're
off
taking the quote out of context, as you do in another area as well.
Well, let's explore the quote.
Yeah.
A lot of business guys voted for Obama thinking that he was going to be kind of another Clinton. In other words, a centrist on economics, maybe liberal in social policy. There's a widespread sense that he is anti-business. Why? Because he has greatly expanded the sphere of the federal government in a number of areas where its touch was pretty light. Automobiles, energy, healthcare, financial regulation, the banking, mortgage lending. Now, you might say this is all good, and as a liberal, you might think it's wonderful.
No, that's not what we're talking about.
But the truth of it is, isn't it a fact that Obama has racked up the spending, has always talked about sticking the tab to the rich, and has increased federal control, not nationalization, but federal control over large sectors of private enterprise, and all of this has put business on strike. I mean, if you want to know why our economy isn't doing well, one possible explanation is Obama is anti-business, and businessmen know that.
They're not on strike. The market's doing very well. But let me just take. You say he has done nothing more than what he you say that he's very different in the campaign than he was in the campaign, and then you go on to say, and there's a quote. Never before have the tentacles of government reached so deeply into the private sector. Never before, page 22.
That's absolutely true.
Okay, let me give you a couple of possibilities.
Okay.
1933, the National Recovery Act, where every business was made to adhere to government codes. I write in my earlier book, The Defining Moment, about how they even regulated striptease establishments, about the number of times a striptease
Jonathan,
could
you
take
have
over
to...
close. 1971, Richard Nixon.
Right.
Wage and price controls, rigid controls on what things cost in our economy. You said never before have the tentacles. In both those cases, let me just finish the question. The tentacles extended much further than Barack Obama adopting Mitt Romney, Howard Baker, and Bob Dole's health care plan.
Well,
so you tell me where they extended anywhere close to as far as they went in 1933 or 1971.
Well, let's look at the two cases you mentioned. First of all, in the 1930s, we were in a Great Depression. In other words, extreme situations like a war, World War II.
Like we were headed for a depression. We were losing 750,000 jobs a month when Obama took office. If they hadn't put a tourniquet, Dinesh, if they hadn't intervened as President Bush wanted to and started with TARP, and Obama continued, how would we have prevented a depression? We were on a path to a depression.
This is all
750,000 jobs a month? That's not ideology. That's fact. That's a fact.
The so-called the depression that you're talking about is a depression that never was. How do another possibility is that a panic was used as a pretext for massive government
How can
increase.
losing $750,000 jobs a month, how is that a pretext?
Look,
that's a fact.
Our unemployment rate currently is about 9%. It was actually about 7.5% when Obama took office.
That was from the previous year. That was reflecting, economics.
All right, so
that was
that's right.
2008
but we're talking, this is compared to 30% or 35% unemployment in the Great Depression. There's no comparison. So just citing
25% actually.
25%.
We were headed for 20% unemployment if the auto industry had gone under.
But see,
they would have lost a
Jonathan,
few million jobs.
Now you sound a bit like Obama. We were going to do this.
You don't believe so?
I don't
believe so. If the auto industry had gone under, if the American auto industry had gone under, you don't think there would have been repercussions for our
There would
economy?
certainly have been repercussions, but I think what you're missing is that, see, your idea is that the government saves jobs by spending money over here. You're forgetting that to save a job, a government has to pick somebody's pocket over there. That guy could have used the money to create a job.
Let's move on from this particular point. You'll admit that never before was maybe not
No,
not
never
quite the right
before has a
language.
U.S. president got up in the morning and fired the head of General Motors.
Well, first of all, you say that was done by an anti-capitalist. It was actually done by Stephen Ratner of Lazard Frere and Triangle.
Well, that's silly.
A pillar of Wall Street.
Look, he's a pawn of Obama. Obama appoints the czar, and you're saying that it's Ratner's decision and
but
Obama.
You're making it sound like his firing. Let me just be clear on this, because this relates to your book, Dinesh.
Right.
You're suggesting that you make the case in your book that his firing Rick Wagner, the chairman of General Motors, is prima facie evidence that he is in the grip of an anti-capitalist ideology.
no.
When there are quite a number of pillars of capitalism
See, you're switching on me.
who
A
believe
moment
that
ago-
his
No.
performance was so pathetic as head of GM that he had to be fired.
I think he deserved to be
By
fired.
the way, we've got all
Hold
the
on.
money back from the auto
Look.
companies. So.
No, you're changing
Yeah.
topics on me. You just asked me to point to a case where the government has gone further than it has before in regulating the private sector. I gave you an example. You switched back to an earlier question where earlier
but
you asked
said
me
never
about his...
before the tentacles of government. You're
Right.
talking about regulation, the tentacles of government.
Right.
You're not talking about a one-off where, you know, first of all, they didn't have the power to fire him.
Okay.
Or they asked for his resignation. By the way, there are plenty of examples going back of presidents who've taken a very strong line against errant capitalism. Somebody from your own party, Theodore Roosevelt. Now,
Right.
would you say the same things that you say about Barack Obama, about Theodore Roosevelt and some of his very, very tough rhetoric, much tougher rhetoric about business than
No,
anything
but
we've heard
John,
from
you've
Obama?
got to keep things in perspective. What was the percentage of federal spending in the 1930s?
It was
it
a
was
lot
minuscule.
lower. But now you're changing on
No,
me.
no, because
My
I
question
think-
for you is, you're saying that you're
I'm saying the federal government
Look,
today
Dinesh,
is involved in all these major sectors. It has a much larger presence in our economy.
enough.
True enough? Okay.
Okay.
So if that alone is a sign of expanding federal power, expanding federal debt, sticking it to the high-income taxpayer, well, isn't that evidence of a mentality that's against free enterprise, against private enterprise?
Let's
To me, it is.
go back to your book. Toward the beginning, you assert, with no evidence, that a story that Obama remembers seeing in a magazine as a small child, he was a youth, when he saw what he thought, later wrongly remembered, was a story about a black man trying to do something to his skin to make him appear more white. Now,
Right.
he wrongly, you're quite accurate that he wrongly remembered seeing that in, I think, Ebony magazine. There was no evidence that it was in Ebony magazine. There's no evidence that surfaced yet of it being in another magazine. That doesn't mean that he was lying, because it could very easily have been in another magazine. But you go on to assert that that thinking, that idea that he remembers from when he was a small child, actually comes from his reading the anti-colonialist work of Frantz Fanon. Where is your evidence that he concocted that story based on Frantz Fanon? Or is that more accurately described, as much of the book, as a supposition rather than actually a conclusion based on evidence?
Well, it is a plausible supposition based on the fact that we know that Obama didn't get it where he said he did. Now, you're pretending like it was the memory of a 10-year-old. This is Obama writing a book in 1995 when the man is in his 30s, a book that was widely reprinted when he spoke at the Democratic Convention in 2004, that was used as a campaign document in 2008. Now, let me read a sentence, if I may, from Obama's recollection. He's talking about seeing this article in Life magazine. He says, "I felt my face and neck get hot. My stomach knotted. The type began to blur the page. I had a desperate urge to jump out of my seat to demand some explanation, some reassurance." He said the man he saw looked sickly, quote, "like a radiation victim or an albino." There is an emotional intensity and precision to this incident. By the way, it takes up quite a bit of space. It's a fairly pivotal incident in Obama's own book, in his own description of coming to terms with his racial identity. So here's my point. If you don't remember something that happened when you were 10, how would you have such clinical detail about the incident that never happened or that you can't remember? You're generally going to find data somewhere else. But now here's the point. The incident involved a man who took radiation treatments or chemical treatments to lighten his skin. I'm reading Frantz Fanon, the anti-colonial writer's book, Black Skin, White Masks, and he's talking about North African Negroes who try to act in a way that resembles their colonizers, the French. And he says they want to look white, and they want to dress white and talk white. And then he says, I even know of one case of a black man who took radiation and chemical treatments to lighten his skin. It's eerily similar to the episode in Obama, and Obama mentions Frantz Fanon in his book. So it's not unreasonable to think Obama read Fanon. It's not unreasonable to think he lifted the incident, which cannot be found in his sources, but I have found in one of Obama's other sources. So yes, can I prove that Obama got it from Fanon? But no, it's the best explanation out there, isn't
You're
it?
making a series, this is just one of many logical suppositions jumps where you're getting over a big gap to establish a point without actually providing evidence for that point. I mean, these are all logical leaps. Would you concede that?
Let me say what I say. I say here, I believe, is where Obama got his skin treatment story. He found it in Fanon and altered the setting.
He found it in Fanon.
He found
you
it in
don't know
Fanon.
that.
Well, I don't know if he found it in Fanon.
Okay,
That's why
this is a supposition.
I'm offering a theory.
So we should say that this is in the realm of speculation and supposition. Is it fair to characterize the book that way?
No, because here we are talking about an incident that occurred when Obama was 10. You weren't there. I wasn't there. Obama was the only one there. So there is no other way to analyze it other than to say, let's look at the most believable explanation for what happened.
And it's not believable to you that in an era where African American men were, they called it conking their hair, straightening their hair to look more white, and where clearly the status pecking order favored those with lighter skin. There's a whole history to this, which I'm sure
There's
you know.
a whole history to this.
It's not fair to assume that perhaps a very young Barack Obama was telling some version of the truth, that he saw some article, not in Life magazine, someplace else,
this is where
that upset him, that he just made this story up. Is that what you're suggesting, based on radical literature that he read in later years?
That's not my point. You're missing the point. There is a legitimate history here. Obama could easily have cited it, but here's why he didn't cite it. Obama's history is not typical African American history. Obama never sat at a segregated lunch counter. In fact, being African American in America, by and large, means being descended from slaves. Obama is not descended from slaves. He's descended from an educated immigrant from Kenya who went to Harvard, and from a white woman who grew up in Kansas and then Hawaii. So my point is, it was very important for Obama to attribute the incident to himself, because it was part of an attempt to create his African American identity. He could easily have cited a book that said Madam C.J. Walker in 1903 sold skin treatment potions. He didn't want to do that because it was important for him to establish his.
Okay, so let's just be clear. You're accusing him of making something up, but you don't have evidence that he made it up.
I know that it's not in his source, and I'm giving a better explanation for where he got it.
You know more about colonialism than I do, or anti-colonialism, and you're very steeped in the literature of that. But I think that I might know, based on my research, a little bit more about Barack Obama than you do, not just from personal knowledge of him over some years, but from talking to a lot of people around him. Do you honestly believe that he wants, say, a new energy policy for this country as part of an anti-colonial view, or do you think it might actually have more to do with trying to free us from, say, the anti-colonial Saudi Arabians who have us addicted to their oil? If he was so anti-colonialist, if that was the animating principle of his politics, which is what you argue, why is he going after the anti-colonialists in that part of the world who have us over a barrel?
Well, first of all, the Saudis are not anti-colonialist anything. They have nothing to do with anti-colonialism. They're ruling their own country. They're not ruling somebody else's country.
No, but I mean, you're the one who's steeped in the history of, you know, Lawrence of Arabia. You know, they had to come out from under British rule. The Saudi royal family, it was the product of you know, an early movement against empire.
I think the way to understand anti-colonialism is simply the idea that the world is divided into the rich white West, and now America, that has gotten rich by invading, occupying, and looting the poor countries. And that within the rich countries, there are concentrated economic interests, banks, oil companies, corporate elites, by and large, the big bad corporations that are ripping off people in their own country and around the world. Now, I think
you agree with a lot of that analysis, right?
Well, I agree with some of it, although I think that the world is different now and that there are much better ways to get over the legacy of colonialism. But we can talk about that.
But you agree that colonialism, 19th and 20th century colonialism, was not generally a positive thing for the world, right? Or do you challenge that assumption as well?
Well, I do challenge that assumption because in fact, I don't just challenge
So Europe carving up Africa for its own, that was fine?
See, you're not letting me explain. The Prime Minister of India, Manmohan Singh, recently went to Oxford University, and he said, India is on the way to becoming a superpower. He said, we're growing at 10%. He said, and the reason for that is, he said, we speak English. He said, we have universities, we have technology,
Right.
we have democracy, we have property rights, we have contracts. And he says, and how did we get those things? We got them from the British. Now, I admit, when I was growing up, no Indian leader could have given that speech. So the Indians are now taking a new look at what they got from imperialism. Do they want the British ruling? Of course not. So I'm an anti-colonialist in the sense I believe countries should be independent. But if you're asking me, was the wealth of the West generated purely through conquest? No. That forgets about the Enlightenment, the Reformation, the Industrial Revolution, internal sources of Western affluence.
Your
all that
analysis
being
is
said,
not. Go ahead.
It's not.
Please continue.
So the point I want to make about Obama is this. My point isn't that Obama's anti-colonialist per se. He is frozen in his father's time machine. He's taking a kind of antiquated anti-colonialism of 50 years ago and using it on a very different stage. For example, if you look at America, are we in Iraq to be a colonial power? Obama says we are, but we're not. Are we in Afghanistan to fight a colonial war? Obama acts as though we are. We're not. So for Obama...
Wait a minute, he just sent another 40,000 troops. We now have 100,000 troops there.
Yeah, but there's a reason for that.
If he's Mr. Anti-colonialist, why did he do that?
Okay, the reason he did that is that for tactical reasons in the campaign when he was running against Bush, he made a distinction between the good war and the bad war. He told the American people Iraq, which is Bush's war, is the bad war. That's the war of choice. Afghanistan, he said, is a war of necessity. In other words, he didn't want to come out against both because it would make him look weak on defense, so he made a distinction. Then he inherited the Afghan war.
Dinesh, everybody knows this modern history. Your description of colonialism, the positive residues of it in education and other areas, as well as the negative legacy, mirrors almost exactly not only what I would think, it's a mixed story, but what Barack Obama, based on everything that he's ever said or written, would think. He has a subtle appreciation. You're trying to put him into a left-wing straitjacket here based on the writings of his father.
Not really.
I need more evidence.
I'll give you the
Where's
evidence.
the evidence that he's some kind of a wild-eyed, anti-colonial, quasi-Marxist?
Okay, well, you have to let me speak, because if you just dispute and quibble with me about small points in the book,
these are important questions.
I can't.
We have plenty of time.
I
So
can't
go ahead.
lay out the evidence. All right, so here's the evidence. Obama has been doing two things simultaneously. He has been domestically expanding the power of the state, and internationally contracting America's role on the world stage. For example, now he's getting us out of Iraq. He's announced a withdrawal from Afghanistan in 12 months.
Based on President Bush's
let's put aside what it's based on. Let me just finish.
Okay.
He goes on a kind of apology tour to the third world, to Europe, basically saying, I'm going to contain, if you will, this American imperium. I'm not going to let America unilaterally dominate and bully the world. I'm going to put a leash on this, and you can help me to do that. Now, this is an American leader, in a sense, calling on foreigners to help him control America. So he acts in his conduct. Well, you may not agree, but let me lay out the argument here. So why would someone domestically expand the government while internationally contracting American power? Whether you think it's for good or bad reason. I say the anti-colonial theory is the best one that explains both. Think of all the other theories out there. Obama is a civil rights wonder, the realization of Martin Luther King's dream. That's David Remnick in his book, The Bridge. Or Obama is a secret Muslim. Or Obama is a socialist. It seems to me all those theories can't fit the data. The beauty of the anti-colonial theory is it says that the anti-colonial agenda is twofold. Number one, it views America and the West as a rogue elephant stampeding around the world. And it says, put a saddle and a leash on that elephant, pull him back. And second, it says, in America, you've got neo-colonial corporate forces ripping off the poor, ripping off the ordinary citizen. Let's make sure you decolonize those forces, establish the rod of government control over them. That's exactly what Obama's doing. So,
but why isn't that Teddy Roosevelt progressive republicanism rather than some cockamamie theory that the point of which is just to tar him as a left-winger?
If you read Obama's own autobiography, the theme of colonialism is far more prominent than the theme of civil rights. He does talk about civil rights, I grant you,
Quite a bit.
But he talks about colonialism extensively. Even Remnick says it's a book about colonialism. So I think what's sad is And this is a very American tendency. We're all projecting American history onto Obama. We're ignoring Obama's own history. You won't let me describe Obama's relationship with colonialism. Let me give you a small hint of that. I'm a foreigner. I grew up in India. I'm an immigrant to America. I did not land on the American mainland till I was 17. Okay. Obama didn't land on the American mainland till he was 17.
Are you comparing India to Hawaii, which has been a state for 50 years?
First of all, it became a state in 1959, 2 years before Obama was born. Second of all, there's a long history of colonialism in Hawaii. Okay. Obama was very much exposed to that. So he spent years in Hawaii, 4 years in Indonesia. Subsequently, he went to Pakistan, multiple trips to Africa. Even in Hawaii, one of his mentors was the former communist Frank Marshall Davis, a person whose identity Obama sort of camouflages in his book. Here's my point. Yeah. This is a man with radical associations, some of which he reveals, some of which he suppresses, but his mentor at Columbia, okay. Edward Said, an anti-colonial writer.
First of all, you're establishing him as his mentor when Obama never said
his teacher? Will that
satisfy you?
One
of many teachers that he had. But just to go back to these, quote, radical associations, which is a trope on the right, Condoleezza Rice has a new book out about her childhood, and she talks about how Stokely Carmichael was a frequent guest in her home when she was growing up. Should we hold that against her? Or should we try to impute some motives or values to Condoleezza Rice because Stokely Carmichael was there? She answers the question, by the way. She says no, and she says to do so with Obama is also wrong.
You got it. Well, if you look at Obama, first of all, he was raised, in a sense, for most of his life, his young life, by neither his father nor his mother. He had mentors and surrogate fathers all the way. In fact, he says in his book, I looked at these surrogate mentors or fathers and I compared them to my real father and they always fell short, signifying the influence of his real father, the man who wasn't there. Who were the surrogate fathers? Frank Marshall Davis, Edward Said at Harvard.
Hold on, let me finish. I'm not making it up. You don't know that Edward Said was a surrogate father. Why do you make these assertions? You don't have any evidence for that.
I have a lot of evidence for it. Roberto Manga
You have no evidence about his relationship with Edward Said.
Yes, I do. He appeared at a fundraiser for Edward Said in Chicago, and at which Said spoke. Obama maintained a relationship with Said until his death a few years ago.
All
right. But most of us don't maintain lifelong connections with all our professors.
He has other mentors who are. I'm from Chicago and I know them. They're
One
Jewish.
of his other
Maybe
mentors was the Brazilian revolutionary socialist Roberto Manga Unger. They were pretty close. They were texting each other right up till the election, at which point Unger disappeared and he told David Remnick, I didn't want to be interviewed because I'm a revolutionary, and if people find out about my close connection with Obama, it's going to hurt Obama.
Well, that's just common.
That may be his opinion.
Common sense on his part in the middle of a
Jeremiah
campaign.
Wright, Bill Ayers. I mean, my point is, this is not a matter of Stokely Carmichael coming to my house. It's a series of radical associations throughout his life.
Yeah.
It's a big difference.
I mean, this is something that
is it an accident?
I would ask you why you only focused on the associations that he had with so-called radicals in you, without evidence, established much closer connections than there's any evidence to suggest. And you never mention many of the other mainstream pillars of the establishment, some of whom I know from Chicago. Let's take one, Newton Minow, chairman of the FCC under John F. Kennedy, and the head of the law firm where Barack and Michelle Obama met, described by Obama many times, along with former Congressman and federal Judge Abner Mikva, as mentors. Now, you're suggesting that they are not even worthy of mention in your book, but anytime he might come into contact or take a class from somebody who you can smear, that therefore these people are the ones who determined his development? Don't you give him a little more credit for sorting out the various influences on his life? Some are pillars of the establishment, some are critics. One was a rabbi at the temple across the street from where he lived in Kenwood.
How many times?
We had a close relationship with. You don't mention any of those folks.
How many times does Obama mention Minow in his book?
Well, his book is about the early part of his life. It's not about that part of his life.
It's up to the part of his life when he was a state senator. Now, what do you mean the early part? You're acting as though it was until he was 21. It was a book that was published in 1995 when Obama was in his mid-30s.
For various literary purposes, and viewers should know who have not read Dreams from My Father, that it's a literary work. Some critics called it a lyrical work. It is not a work of politics. It is not a an argument for some left-wing
No,
agenda.
I agree with
and
that.
people need to understand
I do
that.
agree with that. But let me say this. Abner Mikva, I agree, was influential in pushing Obama forward. But I cannot compare the influence of Mikva with, say, Jeremiah Wright. Here is a guy in whose church Obama sat for 20 years. Yeah. He gave his largest charitable contributions to it. He had his children baptized there. And when he heard a sermon from Jeremiah Wright, it was so influential that he took the name of the sermon for his book, The Audacity of Hope. Now, the only other time I know Obama did that is when he changed his name to match his father's African name. So for Obama, these things are not insignificant.
These are all interesting details. They've been reported on endlessly.
Right,
what you do differently in your book is that you take these facts, you take them out of context. So, say the political reasons that he joined Trinity Church so that he could meet people who would be useful to him in politics, which personally, my supposition would be that this is a very ambitious young politician.
Right. And I don't think that's why he went to Trinity, by the way. It's not to make connections.
So it is a matter of what you think and versus what somebody else might think. But we just need to be clear for viewers. It's not what you know or what you've reported.
It is
you think that I think he went there for political reasons. Neither of us know. So what you're talking about, you're imputing, you're cherry picking things that are very destructive of his reputation, or trying to make him out to be a rage-filled left-winger, and you are ignoring any contrary evidence. And I think somebody who is neither a conservative like you or more liberal like me might justifiably say, correct me if I'm wrong, that that's not the most fair approach to sorting out and getting at the complex truth of Barack Obama.
I think that is wrong, Jonathan, for this reason. We all look at facts and try to make sense of them. We have to do it based on what Obama himself says. Obama came back from Africa from a very powerful incident where he wept at his father's grave, and then he comes back to America, he goes to Chicago, and he goes to Reverend Jeremiah Wright's church. Let me finish. And as he approaches it, he says himself, I saw a sign in the lawn that said, Free South Africa. So right away, the international, the third world theme is evident on that sign. Obama's excited. He goes in. He sees a man in a dashiki. He quotes from that very first sermon he heard. It obviously made an impact on him. It was years ago. And what was Reverend Jeremiah Wright doing? He was basically linking the civil rights struggle at home with the third world. He was linking it with Haiti and South Africa, and this is the anti-colonial theme.
That's all fine. But you say in your book that the important thing is what he said as president. But you don't want to quote any of the many other things he said as president that are affirming for American society, affirming for American culture. You want to take things that he said as president that can serve your argument. And I want to take one example, because this is something that I know about. You cite my book, you footnote my book, in a section where I'm writing about his decision to have a series of deliberations about Afghanistan in the fall of 2009. And the president said to me in an on-the-record interview that he wanted to, quote, slow everything down. He felt like he had moved to a rapid escalation in the spring, and that before he sent another 40,000 troops, he wanted to slow everything down, meaning slow the debate down, so that they could examine the assumptions behind the war, examine the assumptions behind the assessment of our national security that would require a troop escalation, and then he moved forward with his escalation. You quote me quoting the president saying he wanted to slow everything down, meaning he wanted to slow down defense spending, which is not what he said at all. And this is of a piece with some of the carelessness, isn't it, that led Forbes magazine to have to issue a correction on some of your quotations of the president.
Well, Forbes' correction was on one minor misquote, and it had no effect, no significance to my argument. Let me quote your quote, and this is directly from your book, and we'll see if I'm misrepresenting you. I say, Alter quotes Obama saying, and you tell me if the quote is wrong, for the past 8 years, whatever the military asked for, they got. My job was to slow things down. Now, this does not mean slowing down a debate. It means whatever the military asked for.
It does mean...
It means that whatever the military asked for, they got.
Dinesh,
I'm going to slow down.
Who was there? Who was sitting in the Oval Office?
Did I correctly quote you?
No, you incorrectly quoted me.
Isn't this the quote from your book?
That is a totally inaccurate depiction of what the president said to me. And
well, hold on. Wait, is the quote wrone?
Yes, that quote is wrong.
You did not say that.
The quote...
The quote is accurate, but you think it means something other than what it says.
I don't think it does. It does mean something.
What is the correct quote?
The context Dinesh.
Oh, the context. So the
Well,
quote is
are you
right.
suggesting the context isn't important?
No, I am suggesting.
He's not talking about the defense budget anywhere close to that
all
part
right,
of the interview.
but so-
He's talking about the debate over Afghanistan.
All right.
So you need.
So let's reaffirm it. The quote is correct.
No, you need
but you
to,
think the context is misleading.
No. The quote is inaccurate.
Okay, so you did not
Yes.
say, let's get it right.
Yeah.
I quote you saying, for the past
Dinesh.
8 years, whatever the military asked
That's
for, they
correct.
got.
That's
My
correct.
job was to slow things down. Did Obama say that?
My job was to slow things down on the troop request.
But
on the
did he say this
No,
or not?
You're making, frankly, Dinesh, you're making an argument that is not even worthy of
No,
you.
no. I just want
The
the viewer to know
No,
that
no,
the
viewer,
quote is right.
No.
You're reading it differently,
narrow-
but you're
no,
pretending like I
you're-
misquoted
no,
you.
we
I did
need-
not misquote
this is
you.
Not, I don't think this is useful or productive for the viewers, but let's just be really clear now.
Okay, let's be clear.
So let's be really clear.
We'll let the
You
viewer
can-
decide
you
what
can-
it means.
Any
Okay,
viewer
let's
knows.
read the quote.
No.
Let's read the quote again.
Excuse me,
For the
Dinesh.
past 8 years, whatever the military asked for, they got. My job was to slow things down. I took that word
Actually-
for word from your book.
Actually,
I cite the page number. It's the correct quote.
those two quotes do not go together. So you link them, and they
look,
don't have anything to do with each other.
So you're saying the
I think we
ellipses
all
are
know-
missing? Is that what you're saying?
Well-
so the quote is accurate, but the ellipses are missing.
The quote is, the way you have rendered it is fundamentally and entirely untrue.
Okay, it's accurate,
So what
but
you've
untrue.
done is untrue, and there are many examples. Now you know from political debate, and
I agree.
Excuse me, let me clarify this.
Okay.
You know from political debate that, and then all of our viewers know, that it's very easy to take any quote and rip it out of context and make it say something that it's not meant to say. You can do that with Adolf Hitler. You can do it with anybody.
Of course, I agree with
right?
that.
Okay, so you agree with that.
But
so
I haven't done that.
the person, well, you have done it.
No,
and
I
the
haven't done
judge
it.
is me because I was there. Excuse me.
No,
Dinesh,
your book
please,
is look. Your book
Dinesh,
is a
please.
sycophantic pro-Obama book.
Excuse me,
It's
Dinesh.
not a critical book. Mine is a critical
Dinesh,
book. So you're arguing
Dinesh,
with me.
you're trying to fill airtime, and we have a lot of it.
Okay.
This is my interview, so
go ahead.
please let me complete. I am the judge of what the context was because I
All
was
right.
there.
Fair enough.
I think that you can insult me, but
Well,
I think
no,
that's
no.
fair
I mean,
enough. So the context of it was, and this is not a matter of opinion or supposition, which is what your book is about. This is a matter of fact. The context, factually, and facts, as we know, can be stubborn things. The context was he was not talking about the defense budget as you assert in your book. He was talking about the discussions over the troop deployment. Because the Pentagon in the past, for the past 8 years, got the troops that they requested, which is actually not true because General Shinseki asked for more troops than President Bush provided him. But the president did say that his perception was the Pentagon had got what it asked for. So he wanted to slow down the deliberation, and before giving them what they asked for, which he did, another thing you don't indicate in your book, before giving them the 40,000 troops, he wanted to slow down the debate. The context that you have, it just so our readers, our listeners are clear, is that he is for slashing the Pentagon budget, which is not true, is not part of his Pentagon budget requests, and bears not even the slightest resemblance to that portion of the conversation. So there's certain things that are debatable, and there's certain things where you should just say, you know what, John, maybe I should have been a little more careful about the context with which I used your book.
Jonathan, look, you were there. You know the context. Okay, I'll defer to you on that. Fair enough?
Excellent. All right, maybe we should move on, 'cause I don't
let
think
me just
this
say
is
one
that
thing.
useful.
When someone says whatever the military asked for, they got, my job was to slow things down,
Right.
a reasonable viewer or reader can read that. And
Only if it's taken out of
your book.
context.
No,
if it was in
not
the context of my book, no reasonable
I don't agree.
reader you couldn't possibly misinterpret it.
Moreover,
I mean, if I had my
if
book
you've
here, I
been
could
reading
show
the
you.
New York Times, Bill Gates has been announcing slashing the defense budget, sharp cuts in defense that are nowhere mirrored in other areas, domestic areas of
Gates, you
government
mean?
spending. Bob Gates.
Yeah.
There have been
The
efforts
Bush,
to...
just so we're clear, the Bush holdover, noted lefty,
No,
noted
the
anti-colonialist,
Bush-
who is slashing our defense budget. Maybe he's
John,
making some
he's
rational
not working
choices.
for Obama.
Yeah.
Isn't Obama the one telling Gates what to do? Isn't Obama the commander-in-chief?
That's a very good question.
He's not the commander-in-chief?
Are you suggesting that
So
Bill
if
Gates
Obama-
has put his integrity in a lockbox
It's not a matter of
and doesn't believe in
integrity.
these
If
cuts in
Obama
defense?
says we don't, Obama's quoted in the
And
article
by the
saying,
way,
talking about belt
the
tightening.
defense budget has gone up under Obama. It's now over $500 billion a year. Are you arguing that that's not sufficient?
No, I'm arguing that there is an austerity program being imposed on defense that is not mirrored in education or health and human services or any other industry. Most of the government is growing at a bloated pace, and defense is being asked to cut back. That's just a fact.
Defense is growing at a faster
growing,
rate.
Okay,
look, the facts are stubborn. Defense spending is growing at a faster rate than non-defense spending in our country. But anyway, let's move on.
Okay.
You say at one point, quote, no credible observer believes Obama's heart is with the Jewish state. Do you believe that in his heart, are you asserting that in his heart he doesn't believe that Israel has a right to exist?
No, to say his heart is with the Jewish state, I mean that fundamentally Obama is not sympathetic toward Israel. He's more sympathetic toward the enemies of Israel, if you will. That Obama sees Israel as a colonial occupier of Palestinian territories. Therefore, he puts pressure on Israel, not on the Palestinians, to make concessions. So I think that there is a widespread sense among analysts and in the Jewish community that Obama is not a friend of the Jewish state.
Okay.
And the anti-colonial theory, by the way, would help to explain that. That Israel is the colonial occupier of the West Bank and Gaza.
All right. Let's go back to this question of his relationship with his father, because that's really at the heart of the book. Quote, he embraced his father's ideals and decided to live out the script of his father's unfulfilled life, unquote. I want to read that again. He embraced his father's ideals and decided to live out the script of his father's unfulfilled life. His father became a drunk at the end of his life, was killed after driving drunk in Africa for various complex tribal reasons that you describe in your book and have been described elsewhere. He fell out with the government of Kenya.
Right.
Where is your evidence that he decided to live out the script of his father's life? And do you think that Barack Obama thinks that the failed script of Barack Obama Sr. was his pattern in life?
No. So
if he had, why wouldn't he have gone back to Africa?
Right, exactly. So you're misconstruing the whole passage. There are three stages in Obama's relationship with his father. It begins with his mother, Anne Obama, cultivating in Obama a mythic reverence for the father. The father's the great man of Africa, the Gandhi of Kenya, and so on. So Obama has a romantic picture of his father. Then Obama discovers that his father was actually a dubious character. He was a polygamist. He was a self-described African socialist. He was a chronic drunk driver. He got liver disease. He killed a man. He finally got drunk in a bar in Nairobi and drove into a tree. So these were traumatic discoveries for Obama and shook his confidence in the earlier romantic picture. So what does Obama do? He says, I got to find out for myself. He goes to Africa. And at his father's grave, he makes a crucial distinction. He basically says, I'm distinguishing between my father, the man, and my father's dreams. I'm not going to go with the man. I'm not going to try to go to Africa and live out my father's failed life. I'm going to pick my father's great vision, his dreams, his ideals. I will carry those out. Now, where's the proof of it? Let me read a sentence from Obama. Now, he's weeping on his father's grave. He says, he actually is trying to connect with his father physically. He says, through Africa's red soil, he's touching the ground, I sat at my father's grave and I spoke to him through Africa's red soil. His father's been dead for 6 years, by the way. Okay? Now, let me read Obama's life. When my tears were spent, I felt a calmness wash over me. I felt the circle finally close. I realized that who I was, what I cared about, was no longer a matter of intellect or obligation, no longer a construct of words. I saw that my life in America, the black life, the white life, the sense of abandonment I felt as a boy, the frustration and hope I witnessed in Chicago, all of it was connected with this small plot of earth, an ocean away, connected by more than the accident of a name or the color of my skin. The pain I felt was my father's pain. So here's Obama in a very direct emotional way, linking himself psychically with his father and saying that even his life away from his father, even in Chicago, even in Hawaii, even in Indonesia, when the man wasn't there, that was part of him. That gives meaning to his life. So how can you read a passage like this and say, and ask a question like you did earlier, he never knew his father? How can you say, I mean, you've read Obama, you've read all this. So
no, I wasn't suggesting and wouldn't suggest now that his father isn't a huge part of his mental landscape.
Thank you.
The question, Dinesh, is what does this have to do with particular decisions that he's made in office?
All
Are
right,
you
so
suggesting
this is the core of my book. In other words, are you saying that the psychic, moral, intellectual, and emotional formation of a man, and this is not Obama writing, by the way, at 10. This is Obama at 35 years old telling you how he became who he is. And then he gets into politics, okay? And you're saying that his actions and his ideas in his subsequent years cannot be understood by looking at those formative influences in his life?
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. I don't think anybody would suggest that.
So that's what my book is about.
Person,
it links.
Any person, you're a product. That's why my first question was
Right,
about
I
your
am.
background. Everybody is, in some measure, a product of their upbringing and who their parents were and all the rest in a complex way.
Right.
But isn't it fundamentally unfair in the United States, where you can always make a new life, as you have, as Barack
Exactly.
Obama did, the difference, correct me if I'm wrong, Dinesh, between us and many other societies around the world, which have, where you do what your father did. You do what your father tells you. You follow in your father's footsteps.
Right.
You don't break away and come from India to the United States and make a new life. And if people in the community want to impute your motives and everything about you to your father, that's just the way it is. Don't we have a different country than that, where we judge people by what they do, not
Absolutely.
by what their father thought?
When you are a public figure, you give an account of your life, okay? Now, I could easily give an account of my life. I haven't, but I could, in which I said, I grew up in India, but that didn't really matter to me, or the stuff I learned there, I've learned other stuff over here. Obama, as a mature man, wrote a story of his own life, which took him back. In fact, he went to Europe, and his mom is from Europe, but he goes, I didn't belong there. Even though it's beautiful, it didn't appeal to me. I had to go to Africa. Obama connects more with the father than the mother. Now, so my point is, yes, if Obama had repudiated his father and his childhood, if he had said, I've learned new things, I'm a new made man, but Obama was circulating his own book about his father as a campaign document 2 years ago.
By the way,
so,
nobody
the relevance of this
nobody
is,
gets, you talk about rage. One thing, just a point of order that does make him very upset, is when people say that that the book is evidence that he didn't have a close relationship with his mother. He wrote this book about his father, but as you I no doubt have read in the epilogue to the book, he says that nobody influenced him more and more profoundly in many ways and changed his life more than his mother. He just didn't happen to write a book about it.
No, I agree with that. But see,
so this
here's the
idea
point.
that he's his father's son, but is not connected to his mother is not true.
And of course it's not true,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is that his mother was his father's first convert. In fact, Obama says, I would talk to my mom and I would criticize my father. Where's my father? Why isn't he here? And he says the mother would defend the father and say in effect, don't criticize him. He was the great man of Africa. When Obama's father walked out on them, and Obama was less than 2 years old, what did Anne Obama do? She married another third world guy, another anti-colonialist, Lolo Soetoro, and moved to Indonesia. When she's in Indonesia, and this is Obama's own description, he says, this Lolo over time became more pro-Western, more pro-capitalist, and more anti-communist. And Anne Obama, Obama's mom, begins to attack him. She calls him a sellout, and she tells Obama, don't be like Lolo Soetoro. Don't be like your stepfather, be like your real father. She packs up Obama and sends him back to Hawaii. Now, Obama's only 10. She doesn't go with him. She stays in Indonesia. From the age of 10 to 17, Obama is not raised by his mother, but by his grandparents.
Right.
So what I'm trying to say is, the mom was hugely influential in building up the dad.
Let's look at the question of presidential parentage just for the few moments that we have left. Ronald Reagan's father was a drunk. His memoirs start with him being drunk on the front stoop.
Yep.
Abraham Lincoln didn't have a relationship with his father. It was so strained. There's all kinds of complications in the parentage of presidents. Is it really right to take that and say that what we know about Ronald Reagan as president, for instance, that is highly relevant, that his father was an alcoholic, or is that kind of a pop psychology that maybe isn't ultimately very useful?
Ronald Reagan wrote an autobiography called An American Life. He didn't write an autobiography called Dreams from My Father. If he had,
he wrote one called Where's the Rest of Me?
Where's the Rest of Me?
This one was in. Yeah.
That's right. And a lot of people did analyze Reagan's troubled relationship with his children, his relationship with Nancy, and looked at the relevance of those things in shaping his character. Obama has opened up himself the issue of his family, his parentage, his lineage. Here's my point. When Obama talks about the rich, when he talks about the rich aren't paying their fair share, I look at government data, I see that rich people in this country, the top 10%, are paying about 70% of all the income taxes. So, Obama wants them to pay their fair share. Well, what's that? 75%, 80%, 90%? Now, Obama's father was an economist and a distinguished one. He wrote a paper in 1965 in the East Africa Journal saying that when you have concentrations of wealth in a society, we should have tax rates with no upper limit. Up to, he says, 100%.
Closer. So you're
So what I'm
saying,
saying is,
that he might. You're saying that Obama might support a tax rate that was closer
No,
to what
no,
we
no.
had under Dwight Eisenhower.
I'm
Actually,
saying-
just again, point of order.
Our
he just
tax
simply
rates-
wants to return them to what they were in the
Our
in the
tax
Clinton
rates were-
administration.
Our tax
Well,
rates...
that's what the proposal to let the tax cuts expire. The proposal is for the wealthy to return the rate to what it was in the Clinton administration. So the question is that fairly described as a highly ideological left-wing view to return the rates to what they were at a period of great prosperity in the Clinton administration?
Isn't it interesting that when his father, an economist, whom Obama says he gets his dreams from, writes an article proposing tax rates of up to 100%?
And you're going to
Wait,
hold
hold
him accountable
on.
for
No,
this?
that article is not reported in Newsweek or the New York Times or CBS News. Why? Because you guys just don't think it's relevant to you. Isn't it rather
we
interesting?
We didn't report on Ronald Reagan's father being a drunk in Newsweek
But Ronald
either,
Reagan
actually.
was not influenced by his father
Oh,
the way
yes,
Obama
he was. He was.
We all are to some
Yes.
degree, but Obama writes his life
Yeah.
story.
Okay, look, the bottom line here is you make him seem like he's an ideologue, all right? And
I think he is an
there's
ideologue.
an awful lot of evidence that he's a pragmatist and not an ideologue. And,
I think
and
he
so
campaigned as a pragmatist, but he isn't. He's emerged as an ideologue.
He's done no different than he promised in the campaign. He promised financial regulatory reform in the campaign, health care reform in the campaign. In fact, he delivered.
He
as
is the
liberals
only
will point out,
president.
less than he promised on health care reform. He promised a whole series of things. He hasn't gone beyond it in any fashion, except that he sent more troops to Afghanistan than he
federal
promised during the
program
campaign.
in the past, every major federal program had bipartisan support. Obama passed health care reform with not a single Republican vote. He could have gotten some Republican votes had he embraced some Republican ideas, but he didn't care because to him the Republican Party is the neo-colonial party, the enemy.
1/3 of the stimulus was tax cuts. $300 billion
We're talking
in
about
tax
health
cuts.
care.
So they didn't.
I was talking about the health care bill. I said he did that without a
Right.
single Republican vote. It didn't even
Right,
seem...
even though it was modeled on Howard Baker
Whether
and
it's-
Bob Dole's bill.
I know, but-
So, that,
so you're
doesn't that say more about the Republican Party than what his father wrote 60 years ago?
No, I don't think it does.
Arguably.
I think that Obama would have done well if you want to bring the country. Look, why is this popularity in the tank? It's because of the
It's where
relentless
Ronald Reagan's was.
partisanship.
It's where Ronald Reagan's was at a similar point in his term.
Yeah,
Just
but
again, matter of fact.
All right, Reagan there was a deep
40,
recession in the
45%.
midterm election.
Yeah.
That's fine. But my point is, Obama had meteoric popularity
Yes.
when he was elected. He had a lot of middle-class guys, a lot of whites, rich people voted for Obama, business guys voted for Obama. In a way, the shine is off Obama because the real Obama, President Obama, is very different than the unifying, healing. I'll listen to reasonable ideas from the other side. The Obama that spoke at the Democratic Convention in 2004, I mean, that speech could have been given at the Republican Convention. But could a Republican have governed like Obama? I don't think so.
Okay, I think let's try to, in our last couple of minutes, just go back to the basic idea of your book, which is that he's animated by a spirit of anti-colonialism and that explains a lot of his policies. Let's look at some of his other policies. We've already established that health care is similar to Mitt Romney's plan and the Republicans' plan of the 90s. Financial re-regulation, do you see that as somehow an outgrowth of his anti-colonial thinking?
Look, I think you can always look at this policy and say, well, I see some traces of that over here. You got to look at the overall picture. Here's what Obama's doing at the same time, okay? First of all, he is increasing government control on banks, mortgage lending, financial regulation, insurance, healthcare, autos. What he wants to do, he has been, until recently, had a moratorium on oil drilling in America while supporting oil drilling in Mexico and subsidizing oil drilling in Brazil. So this is very different than the Al Gore agenda, which is the planet is getting warm, everybody should cut back. Obama is trying to enrich the previously colonized countries and, if you will, put the bill or the taxes onto the colonizers. So this double standard is accounted for by the anti-colonial theory. And I think that while you can look at any individual case and say, well, there were extenuating circumstances over here, and we know why he's coming out of Iraq. I mean, why would Obama support the release, conditionally, but secretly, of the Lockerbie bomber? Why would Obama support a guy who is brought down a Pan Am jet in which hundreds of Americans were killed?
I would argue that it has a lot more to do with our relations with the British and the Libyans than some, something that happened 60 or 70 years ago. But I think on that
70 years ago, the Lockerbie bombing was in the 80s.
No, his father's writing 60 years ago.
No, I'm just saying that if
you're
Obama,
suggesting that his reaction to complex events is
saying
some
that,
sort of some sort of a important connection to something that you spent a lot of time on his father's essay.
But I'm saying, if Obama sees America as a neo-colonial power occupying 2 Muslim countries, and he sees the people fighting against America as resistors of American colonialism.
So he's siding with
he's siding with them. He has
guys?
a measure. No, he doesn't. I'm not saying he approves the killing of Americans. He sees them as like his father, fighting to push the imperial big bad West out. This would explain why he wants to give constitutional protections, legal counsel, close Guantanamo, release the law. See, a lot of people look at that and they say he's a Muslim. He's not a Muslim. He's an anti-colonialist.
Well, I'm glad we established at least one thing today, that the President of the United States is not a Muslim. Dinesh D'Souza, thanks so much. I hope this was the kind of vigorous argument that I know I enjoy, and I certainly
I'm glad we had a chance
very
to
stimulating
get
hour.
into it.
So thanks so much.
It's a pleasure.
University